All right, welcome out everybody. This is the Kentuckiana FileMaker Developers Group, and this is our, what is it, September? Our September group. We've got a few of us here in person at Allen Bird's training facility, so we're doing a bit of a hybrid. So if you, some of us that are here are actually here in person. If you're watching us on YouTube, we meet the fourth Tuesday of every month. And you can check us out at kyfmp.com. So we'd love to have you. So if you're seeing us on YouTube, please be sure and join us. Come be a part of this live and join us here. All right, so today I am going to be the presenter, and I am Ron Glenn Cates of RGC Data. And I've been doing FileMaker for a couple of decades now, and I'm going to be exploring some stuff today that has to do with the FileMaker Data API. Let me get my screen going. So one of the things that I want to do with the approach for this presentation is talk about my own experience with working with the Data API. Was a few years ago. I had been, asked if I could do some integration with FileMaker for one of my clients, and a lot of the stuff that was out there that I found, it felt like there were a lot of the resources were from people who were really versed in web development. And so they were kind of taking the web development aspect of it and saying, okay, here's how you attach and tap into FileMaker. And the problem that I had is that I am a FileMaker developer primarily, first and foremost. I've had limited experience with web development, so I felt like I was missing so much of the necessary pieces of the puzzle to be able to put it together. And it seemed like it took me forever to get to a point where I could finally just put together even the most simple kind of development environment and understand how all the pieces came together. So I'm kind of going to approach this from the standpoint of, if you're a FileMaker developer like me that is now being asked to do some website integration, like where do we start? And in this particular case, because my use cases I've done about 5 different integrations with FileMaker using the Data API, and my clients are small clients, and they have websites that are built in WordPress, and they've been, usually contracted out through like Fiverr or some other service to just put together a website, and they don't have like an in-house web developer that can handle the website end of it. They don't have, the resources or anything like that. So it kind of all fell on me to figure out how to do this integration. And so I, had a lot of challenges trying to figure out how do we integrate and use the Data API and be able to do that with WordPress. So one of the first things that I had to learn how to do was set up a development environment. And so one of the things I'm going to look at, there are a couple of different options. So first of all, if I'm going to develop and work in this, I absolutely need to have a development environment. I do not want to be up on a live website trying to do integrations on a live site. I'm trying to figure out how there we go. I was distracted because my Zoom toolbar was like midway down my screen and it wouldn't go away. Turns out it's not very hard to do a development environment on your local computer, and there's a couple different options to do that. One of them is a web server called XAMPP. And so XAMPP is one option that you can use, and you can just download it and install it on your computer. And so I was kind of debating whether I wanted to download and install XAMPP, or the one that I'm using most recently is called Local WordPress, Local WP. I think it's just called Local, but we can just look it up as Local WP. So I think I'm going to go with Local, and because it's definitely, I like the environment much better. But so finding and setting up and no, maybe I'm not. I don't really want to have to go through all this. All right, let's go with XAMPP. That toolbar keeps coming down on me. Okay. So let's go ahead and download 64-bit. There we go.
For those of you on Mac, I've been using MAMP, M-A-M-P, for a long time, which is basically the same thing.
I actually have installed XAMPP on Mac. I think I ran into some permission issues, but they were pretty easily resolved. But if there's one that's more geared towards it, that's great to know. So. All right. I should be able to just do all the defaults and run through and install. And we're waiting for that. I'm going to go. I keep having to pull this down because my toolbar on Zoom is blocking my tabs. Let's go ahead and grab WordPress too while we're at it. Oops, it's not. I'm so used to having dual monitors at home when I'm doing these things. And now I'm on a 17-inch laptop trying to find my way around. Okay. Yeah, no thanks. Yeah, let's see how our XAMPP's doing.
What I like about these are that you have the ability to have all this, you know, on your desktop machine, for example, your laptop.
Yeah.
And with MAMP, at least, you could turn off that web server, shut it down, so it's not running, you know, all the time until you turn it on.
Yeah, XAMPP works the same way. You can start it and stop it.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, the other one that I was showing, the local, the difference between XAMPP and local is like specifically for WordPress. XAMPP gives you is just a basic web server, so you have to install WordPress, but you also could have like a non-WordPress website.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And while I'm waiting for this, I didn't remember it taking that long to unpack and install, but while I'm waiting for it. So,
but these are the kinds of things that I recommend people get if they want to start to learn PHP and the MySQL parts of web publishing.
yeah.
It's, you know, it's not really published to the world if you don't want to. It's just a place to play pretty easily.
Yeah, and that's so important to be able to play without fear. You know,
Right.
When I'm putting it on a local machine, I mean, you can just experiment and play around, and you know, there's never any fear of anything drastically going wrong because you're on a development environment that's local on your computer, so nobody has access to it.
I think it automatically comes with PHP My Admin,
Yeah.
which is a really good interface for looking at the MySQL and playing with that.
Yeah. And one of the things that, so here's what, for the last couple of years, here's what it looked like for me to do integrations in WordPress with the data API. I had to set up a non-WordPress website to develop and build my PHP pages.
Mm-hmm.
And then in WordPress, I would use a snippet plugin so that I could copy and paste the PHP code and use a plugin in WordPress to inject it into the pages with a shortcode. So I was basically having to do, create a non-WordPress version of the site that I was working on so that I could work on the WordPress stuff. But the problem with that is that, it doesn't always copy and paste and work well in WordPress. Then there's other kinds of adjustments that need to be made. And it's the other thing too is that it was so redundant. So now I had to have, the PHP in two different places. And if I wanted to make a change and test it, I'd have to do that outside of WordPress. And then I'd have to copy those changes and put them into WordPress. And it just got really time consuming and redundant. And oftentimes, if I had to make a little tweak here and there, I might jump right into the WordPress code snippets and make my changes there. But then I'd forget that I'd have to go and update my non-WordPress so that I wouldn't, next time I made a bigger change and copied and pasted the whole code block, I would overwrite, changes that I'd made previously. So probably have to do a little creative editing in the video when I did not recall XAMPP taking this long, and maybe it doesn't on my home computer. It's probably that my laptop is just slower than my home computer. So
Yeah, I've used like a full web server and then did the PHP and just put it in WordPress.
yeah,
And like I say, just added it up there, and that's the only place I needed to do it. I didn't have to do it in two places and test it. Well, because it was on a test server, and then I could deploy it. But and then I've also worked on places where clients already had the MAMP, and it was the web server, and it was talking to FileMaker just however you needed to talk to it.
So have you done some integrations that involved WordPress before?
Just that code snippet you were talking about. Yeah,
So it was you
that's
use the
how I
same.
did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, before they had the data API, I just simply had to do like a CSV, feed of data that I needed to push up with. I think I used FTP, but
Yeah.
the client could do all of this, create the code that got FTP'd up there. So they weren't creating the code, they were just saying, here's the data I want there. And then my PHP that was read by the snippet would then process that download and be able to do what it needed to do with that data. So there wasn't any FileMaker to MySQL conversion or anything like that. It just needed to be static data that went up periodically and changed, but we needed to make it easy for them to be able to get that data up there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of other, one of the things that I ran into with, pulling live from the database, you have to be careful with WordPress too, because if you've got plugins that do caching,
Oh, yeah.
then you won't get the updated data from the database.
Yeah.
So when I was working on kyfmp.com, I was making some changes and it was really frustrating me because I kept testing it and it wasn't getting the changes from the database. And I realized that there was a plugin in there that I think it came pre-installed with the host company, like uh, Hostinger and stuff like that will sometimes have some plugins that
Oh,
are already
yeah.
pre-packaged. And so I was finally realized that I needed to turn that off so that it would stop caching. So
Like I say, it's a good start for people that want to get in there and have some place to play, you know, with the SQL and with the PHP.
yeah.
And you can put JavaScript in there as well.
Hey, Ron, this is Dean Sir.
Yeah.
I'm a little curious. Well, first off, and I stepped away for just a moment. You may have said this, but it's important to note that a couple of things about WordPress. It is SQL based, but the data is serialized. So we're used to records, and this is serialized data. So you can't just go in there and directly access a SQL database like you might in other cases. But your comment about caching has my brain spinning a little bit. When you say you're getting cache data back, help me understand how you're accessing that data, so I know how to defeat the cache or update the cache.
Well, it's using Data API to pull the data from the FileMaker database. And I'm not sure how these caching plugins work, but my what I assume is that it didn't recognize that that was pulling live data. So
Gotcha. So it's FileMaker live data that's pulled into WordPress, and then you
yeah,
need to trigger WordPress to update the cache. And that last step is what you're talking about.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So that yeah. So the data is just being pulled through the data API using PHP directly into the WordPress pages. So it's not using like the WordPress database at all.
Gotcha.
Um,
Oh,
and
gotcha. Yeah.
okay, so we're getting somewhere. We finally got XAMPP installed. So the first thing we need to do is start XAMPP and start the SQL server on XAMPP. Allow.
And the other point, Dean, is that with MySQL, especially if you're using with PHP, there's a lot of encryption going on data that just simply cannot be read by FileMaker, or there are dependencies. You know, you can't read something without something else being open and read, and you know, all that kind of thing that just kind of blocks you from just saying FileMaker, look at the MySQL. It just can't be done in a lot of cases, and so um
Yeah, no, I agree, Beverly. But that's the challenge with getting into any
oh, this uses
setup.
Maria. Wow.
So yeah, once we have XAMPP
Which is
installed,
not
and then
even MySQL, it's MariaDB.
which one
all,
is
all the same.
yeah.
Um, but I thought MariaDB was NoSQL.
My understanding of MariaDB is it's a slot for slot replacement for MySQL, and at least as I've snooped around, it's supposed to be a little faster.
Hmm.
All right, so we've got XAMPP installed. Now we're looking at installing WordPress, which we've downloaded WordPress from the WordPress website, and now it's just a matter of copying that WordPress directory from the download into the htdocs directory of XAMPP, and then I'm just going to rename it Oop, that's not what I want. What was I thinking? Okay, I'm just going to rename it, and then I can go back to localhost, and I can just, one of the first things we're going to need to do before we can set up the PHP is we need to create the database for our site. So that doesn't happen automatically with the WordPress, but that's the only thing. So we just create a new database and give it a name. So in this case, I'm just going to call it CWP. Oops. And create. And there we go. And that's literally all I need to do at this point. And then I can go to localhost and call my subdirectory, and it'll take us right into the setup for WordPress. And we give it the database name that we just created, CWP. For username, it's going to be root and no password. And then the rest of it stays the same, and we hit submit and run the installation. Site type, we'll call it Snippets. And I'm going to do my username. I know it's a weak password, but since it's on my local machine, I'd rather do it that way so I don't forget what it is. Nope. Okay, and then discard search engines. That doesn't matter because the web can't get to it anyway. Can't even see if that's spinning. Are we? Yeah, there we go. Uh-oh. Well, ain't that nice. Oh. Oh no, that's my WordPress admin. One should be this. Okay, well, isn't it fun when presentations go this way? Yeah. I wonder, did I?
Does it need a password?
I've done a bunch of these and I was sure that it was just root and no password. Oh, what's going on now?
Target machine refused. You have another one running?
No. Yeah, I've never had this happen before, so I'm not sure. Target machine actively refused a connection control. right, well, that's kind of a catastrophic failure. Catastrophic failure. Oh, what fun. All right, well, maybe we could try this one. Oh, it wasn't even started. Let's see if that. Let's see if that has. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so the database, the MySQL server isn't starting up, and this is definitely beyond the scope of me being able to troubleshoot, fix that right now. So let's go to plan B. Let's see if we can. Actually, I wonder if I could just log in, because I've got an account in here. Should be able to download it from there. Download the latest version. There we go. All right. One of the nice things about local is that you actually can provide access from outside of your local domain. You can,
Right,
it's
right,
got a, yeah, it's got an option to turn that on and provide a link to somebody. But it's actually secured with a username and password so that it's not just open to the web.
right. Like I said, that's how one client was using it. It was open to the web, but it was login.
Yeah. All right, what's going on? Are we loading up or aren't we? There we go. I already did this part. Where is? Yeah, where? Yeah, yeah.
I'm pasting in some links that might be helpful to people following along on the things we're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. So Beverly, when you were doing your WordPress integrations with that snippet, were you, so you weren't using the data API to pull the data directly, or?
No, it was before the data API. It was
Okay,
years ago. Like I said, we would basically export, the data that needed to come out of FileMaker.
yeah,
And it was done in a way that we could use. I think we probably used Troy File plugin at that point, maybe something that would allow us to, or maybe it was just a link that we had set up that would allow them to directly securely FTP what they exported to the web server. And then they would call that script on the web, which would read whatever was uploaded and process it. It was something that didn't change real often, but
yeah.
if it changed, every 2 weeks or once a month, it really was a very good system.
Okay, here we go. So I switched to local recently anyway, because it is a little bit easier than XAMPP. So
Dean put in something. It was really good tip. Thanks, Dean.
It's from the School of Hard Knocks.
Oh yeah. Been there, done that.
oh,
Well, I
nice.
was a hosting provider for a long time. So it's like I had to learn it all.
My biggest lesson is to let others do it as much as you can.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then we kind of started part of this conversation about using Clara Studio, and that was the kind of websites I built back in the day. Something really custom, but with a lot of back end stuff that allowed them to say change colors and change, labels and all that kind of stuff that made it really easy for them to create reports and things like that. And then there was the public facing side that was seen. So kind of like what WordPress does is you've got a lot of admin backend, that allows you to make all these changes. But even at that, it isn't real customizable without going in and that, doing a lot of customization. And you go at that point, well, I start from, I'm going to create my own, but that you have to set up the security, and you have to set up, the caches and what you want to cache and what you don't want to cache. And it's a lot of work
Yeah,
to do custom. And then you look at the better forms, which kind of takes care of a lot of that for you. You go like, okay. That's a difference. And that's what WordPress does, is it tries to make it generic enough that anybody can do it, but they have the add-ons and the plugins and the different themes and all the stuff that kind of lets it build a little more different for each person.
I think too that, WordPress, I'm sure the initial concept of WordPress is that, hey, here's a way that you can basically build a site without having a big learning curve, because you don't have to learn
Correct.
how to do any coding and all that kind of
Correct.
stuff. What it's grown to now, WordPress has a huge learning curve of its own.
Yeah, it kind of depends on how much you put into add-ons.
Yeah, and what what your use case is. Of course, sure, it's easy enough to just create a website and snap in a template and change, a little bit of content. But a lot of times, if you're wanting to add certain functionality, it gets really
Oh
complicated.
yeah, yeah. Again, depends on what you're doing. I did a lot of things with carts too. CS cart was one that I used for a long time. That were kind of the same thing. The idea was that it was pretty well set up with the generics that you needed, and it was pretty easy to add on, specific stuff without too much fuss. But it was just all about a shopping cart.
So finally, we have a working WordPress site on my
All
local
right.
laptop here. So we're getting somewhere. And I just went ahead and threw the hello theme on it because I do use Elementor. I just remembered I gotta grab my plugin now. So one of the things that I ran into that kind of complicated things for doing the integration with WordPress, first of all, for doing the data API, basically you need to have like a worker class, a class of functions that does the connection and manages the tokens and everything. And there's a bunch of them out there. Ones like FM Restore, there's one just called FM Rest, there's FM PDA.
Right.
But in order to use those, you've got to be able to upload those to your WordPress website, to your directories. And that's just a whole nother thing for
Oh yeah.
figuring out where to put it and how to access it, doing all that kind of stuff. And then it can be called with an include. Oh, here's where I'm going. And then the other thing that gets a little complex, and not really complicated, but it's something to take into account, is that most all of this data API stuff runs off of sessions.
Right.
And so if you want to start a session in WordPress, well, where do you start it? Because it's got to be started before anything is like, it's got to be started as one of the very first things
Oh yeah.
in the PHP, before the headers and all that. So that becomes a concern. I've done it several different ways in the past. Like I had to, I've gone in and edited the template, the theme template, so that when it initially loaded, it was opening the session at that point. And then I got to the point where I put it into the functions. So if you go to theme file editor, I need to, there we go. Then you can put it into the, where is it? Oh, theme functions, there it is. You can put it in here, but then if you ever update the theme, it'll overwrite your changes.
Yeah.
So then you got to learn how to do stuff like create a child theme, which gives you a separate functions PHP and all that kind of stuff. And so it just started getting really complicated. And so I wondered, what kind of plugins there are out there for integrating with FileMaker. And so if we do a search, the answer is pretty much none. And I've seen others, in the past that were like, I've seen videos of them and things like that. And I think they just haven't stuck around for the most part. This
Yeah.
one is for Gravity forms, and this is just, essentially just to create a couple of forms. So, so basically the end result is that I had to, utilize a Snippet plugin to be able to write my own PHP. And then I had to do the session, and then I had to,
Right.
upload my class and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, upload it. What I decided to do was just kind of simplify a lot of that stuff. And so I've been working on this plugin. And what this plugin does is essentially is a Snippets plugin, but it takes care of the token management. It takes care
Right.
of, and I've explored a couple of different of the classes, the PHP classes for integrating with the data API. But one of the things I found is they will work in WordPress, but they're not like, there's a lot of things that get flagged by WordPress. So when I was doing this plugin, my intention was to make this plugin available through the WordPress repository.
Mhm.
The problem is when I ran the WordPress plugin tester on it, all of it came up with all of these flags and recommendations and all of these things. Like, for instance, WordPress frowns upon using curl. So it has this whole other setup for replacing Perl. It's like WordPress get URL or something like that. So I basically had to completely rewrite a PHP class specifically for being able to pass the requirements to be in the WordPress repository. So,
Yeah.
and I actually just submitted it last week, and they're up to like 30 days out to get approval. So I'm still waiting to find out if it got approved for the repository so that you could just search for it in plugins.
Right.
So anyway, so I built my own snippet plugin, and I just built one that worked better than the one I was using and has a lot of stuff that I didn't have in the one that I was using. So to begin with, under settings, as you would expect, you can set up your server, your database. In this case, well, it doesn't really matter. And your default layout, username and password for your API username
Cool.
to log in. But what I also did is I set up a separate one for like development. So, and I also have a sample database. So so I need to go ahead and actually I can skip that because I can use the one on my development server. So the databases and the default layout is contact details, API, 1, 2, 3, and all that information is right here. So I submit. Uh-oh. Oh, wrong database name. There we go. There we go. And it tells me right there, it actually tested the connection and can tell me right there that the connection was successful. And all that login information is right there. Just click on it. And that's this sample database. And so once I've done that, then I can go back to snippets. And so this is where I would create my new snippets. But before that, what I've done is loaded up this plugin with a bunch of template snippets. And these
Very
are all,
cool.
these are all templates for using all of the functions within that PHP class to connect to the database. So, yeah. So I can let's go to find records, for instance. If I go to edit. And so the other thing I did is I created this as a code editing environment. So you've got basically all the functionality of a pretty decent little code editor, as much as you can do within a web page. It's got, redo and undo and all that kind of stuff. It's got the syntax highlighting and all that. And so this is, for instance, this is the template for how to use the functions available to tap in. And this one runs a fine, and it shows all our different parameters. So in this case, we're basically looking for an email address that equals nu@gmail.com. But then we're also doing a second request that says that equals ron@rgcdata.com. So it's so you can do multiple requests. It's limiting the return to 10. Offset 1. I don't remember where that.
But that's what you would normally send to the data
Yes.
API anyway. Yeah.
Right.
Cool, cool.
And then it's got the script parameters. So if you wanted to run a script before or after the sort, and then so it's all laid out here. So all you have to do is copy and paste that into your own snippet for being able to run a find, for instance. And then it's got a preview system, so I can run the preview right from here, and it gives me the result. And in this case, I've got a function that formats the result like this because I find it easier to read with the black background. And so this is where we get our result.
Cool.
Yeah. So that sets up everything we need to be able to create a connection to the database. And then,
minor question.
Sure.
I don't like the black background.
Yeah,
Is that something that can be changed?
it's not currently, but it's certainly something that I could, take under advisement as adding into settings and stuff. So I could certainly do that.
It's not the black background and the white text. It's too black and too white.
Yeah.
If you reduce, the intensity of both of those, it's not so bad. But most people don't.
Yeah. And really that's just like an extra function that I built in for displaying the response. And it's really doing nothing more than just wrapping the response in a code tag, and then I've added some CSS to do it that way. So I mean, you could literally just kind of write your own code tags and own CSS, which also is another thing about this plugin, is that you can also add CSS to your page. So it actually has not just the code snippet, but the ability to add CSS. And I'll actually show that better in another part. But one of the other things I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of go to get record. So let's look at my get record. And I wanted to find a record that does not have an image. So I can update, and we don't need that one. So preview. There we go. This is a little easier to look at than what the other one was showing. Was a container field. One of the things that I've had a very difficult time with, and I still don't have a solution for, actually I can demonstrate it, is, oh, we don't need that anymore. When it comes to displaying images from a container field, load image from container. See, I can go straight to the preview from here. Using a URL, I have never been able to get it to work. And that comes from this URL right here that is returned from the container field. If I wrap that in an image tag, all I get is 401 unauthorized. I remember watching one time a video that showed that you should just be able to take this and even paste it into a browser. And
sort of.
Yeah.
FileMaker adds, in order to serve a URL like that, there's actually a flag on the server that you can change. It came out around 19. And it's kind of their security mechanism. So they attach a cookie onto that. And that's why you'll sometimes see it work. Like, oh, it worked for me the first time, and then I render it somewhere else and it's not working.
Yeah.
Right. So you can enable that or disable that through a command line.
Oh, you have to do it through command line?
Yeah.
FileMaker server, yeah.
Okay. I would definitely be interested. Can I follow up with you on that later and find out how to do that?
Yeah. If you have any post, I don't think I have a forum post for it, but I just came up in a conversation this morning again with somebody, so I should have something.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fantastic because that's something that has stumped me for a
It's a
long
big
time.
pain in the butt otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, because the workaround was to create a calculation field that gives a base 64 encoded. It
Yeah.
encodes base
But then you're
64.
chunking all that data through your system, right? Where you can fetch
Exactly.
it directly with yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just glad to hear that there is a solution because I have not been able to find anything anywhere that could tell me what was going on with that. So I'm really glad to know that there's a solution. So I'm really excited to find that out because yeah, this is a pain in the butt having to base 64 encode everything and then decode it to display it. So that's good news as far as I'm concerned.
It's one of
So
those cross-site things where, your database is on a different server, probably a different domain.
yeah,
So the
Yeah,
URL that
like a
you get
course kind
back
of
is
idea.
not going to be, yeah.
okay.
Even the
Yeah, it's like
browser
it's kind of
may
like a
balk at it.
cores blocking cookie kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to kind of look at a little bit too, if I go back to my get record preview and edit. So for anybody watching along, that was excited about this, thinking, okay, I don't know much about, coding, but I want to do some integrations. The bad news is you still have to learn how to do some PHP and probably some JavaScript and some other things. So the pages are still being coded. The beauty, though, is that ChatGPT is wonderful for building PHP pages and HTML pages. So I've done a lot of work with that lately for the sample pages that I'm going to show. But the other thing that ended up being really kind of important was learning how to work with PHP arrays because everything is
Yeah.
returned as JSON and then converted to a PHP array. And so learning how to drill down into these arrays is that was a part that's always was such a struggle for me for a while to try and figure out how to get down to the data that I was looking for. But so just a hint for anybody who's trying to kind of get up to speed with PHP enough to do this stuff, really put a lot of time into learning how to work with PHP arrays because that's where all this data comes from and goes to. So, all right, my toolbar is blocking me again. How do I don't know. I don't usually have to deal with that because I'm working on a dual monitor system. So where I'm here in person.
Ron, are you going to show us how you integrated this into a WordPress page? Because that whole processing the JSON and so on, that's another whole set of snippets
Mm-hmm.
to actually displaying it on a page.
Yeah, you mean so, right. And this is one of the things that if I think, right, if you're talking about what you're talking about is basically where I'm at right now is I've just showed you how to pull the data and
Right.
here's your array.
Right.
Now, what do you do with that array? Is that like, how do you display it? How do you show it in your page and all that kind of stuff? Is that what you were referring to?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's where I ran into the same frustration with so many of the tutorials and the videos and sample pages that I was able to get a hold of. They would stop right there because it was like saying, okay, the PHP is up to you. So here you go. And so what I've done with this plugin is, and one of the things that I hope to do is actually in the future provide a lot more of these. But what I've done is provided some sample PHP pages that actually show you exactly how to put a page together and pull the data and display it. So the sample database is essentially just a modified version of the contacts database that comes with FileMaker. And what I've done is here's a PHP page that displays a list of contacts, for instance. And actually, because I'm using, this is another kind of neat place to show this too. I wish that would stop doing that. And here's all the CSS that's included with that. And I just realized that there is, because of the theme that I chose, I need to take that out and update it. And I can go back to my preview, and there we go. And so here's the PHP page that actually pulls the data from the FileMaker database and puts it into a table of a list of contacts. And it also includes, you know, a record count and the ability to go through sets of records.
The
10 at a time.
pagination is wonderful.
Pagination, yeah, that. And it's got a search, so I can actually search for my contacts right from here. There we go, and then I can clear it. God, this is driving me crazy. Let's get rid of a couple of these anyway. Maybe if I get rid of all these, it'll put them all over to the side where I can. Nope, still can't see them. Okay, I'll have to worry about that later. Yeah, does that? Yeah, I don't see it.
Yeah,
I'm
when you're
sure-
a presenter, you've got all those controls.
Yeah, I'm sure there's got to be a way. I just can't find it. Okay, so in my PHP code, this is where, you know, here's your example of exactly how to build your search section, your pagination. It's like, so here's a roadmap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, oh, go back to, going from here, you can view the details for each contact. Oh, I need to do the CSS for that. Edit the CSS. I can edit each contact, including changing pictures. Let's see. Oh, I don't have any. I don't even have pictures I can upload from here. But here's I was gonna say, okay. I'm gonna fix those buttons. But this just goes to show how easy that is. I can go in and edit the CSS right from here. Update my snippet. I can go back. Is that the one I just edited? Oh.
That was the details, yeah.
There we go. It's one of the other things that's really pretty kind of difficult is trying to build pages that will work in any theme is
Yeah.
extraordinarily difficult. So, okay, there we go. So one of the things that always stumped me, or that was a tough one for me, was, you know, it's not terribly difficult to build a form to edit a record in FileMaker, but what if it includes portal data?
Right.
So in this case, the sample database is It's just the contacts database that comes with FileMaker. And it's got phone numbers and emails and addresses, but they're all portals
Yep.
to separate tables. So I've been able to do this form where you can add multiple email addresses, where you can add multiple phone numbers, and it adds them to the portal. So we hit save contact and it adds them to the portal. Go back to edit. And now those portal records have been added. So
Yeah, but then is it updating the database?
yep, sure is.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, I was just thinking I should probably just go ahead and pick the right record. The first record is this one so that I can show the changes. So, oh, wow. I've been doing a lot of,
Experiments.
yeah, I didn't remember doing that many. I don't know how I managed to do that. But let's see. So phone, yep, they're all in there.
One we can recognize and go see it. Is that what we're thinking? No, or they, oh, they're duplicates. Never mind.
Let's get short.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's just taking a while.
Yeah, that was always a tricky method. Just trying to use form fields and JavaScript to get related type data where you could add and add and add and add, you know,
Right, unlimited phone
child
number.
records.
Yeah. Yeah, and it turns out, I mean, it definitely, the scope of a whole nother
Oh, yeah.
presentation would be working with how do you work with the data API, because it's all in the parameters. So you can set up, the form basically feeds all the data to your PHP page that turns it into parameters that get sent to the file, to the API through the API.
Right.
And so easy enough to say, give it field names and data to modify a field. But when it comes to portal data, you're basically creating an array for each of your portals for your related records. And then if you include the record ID of the related record, then it will edit that related portal record.
Right.
So when I'm sending a change to this one, it's grabbing the record ID of, well, it's essentially what it's doing is grabbing all of these child records and kind of rewriting them. But since
Yeah.
they're not, so I mean, it's sending all of the data of the child records whenever I submit the form. So, but as long as it's got the record ID of the child record, then it will edit that child record. If you send that same data without the record ID, then it creates it as a new child record.
Right. Which is how your ad
Yeah,
on the end works. It doesn't have an ID, so it assumes.
Yeah.
It's a new one.
we've,
Yeah.
and I'm just, so if I go here and let's go over to emails so we don't have to deal with those phone numbers. What did we get? Oh. Wouldn't you know it?
The email doesn't work.
Yeah, it's failing on me. I wonder, do I have it record locked maybe or something? Because I thought it worked a minute ago. Yeah, let's try that. Let's see. No.
Hmm.
Let's see.
Just the email part.
Yeah, because the address, it saved a new address record.
Right.
Yeah, so something went wrong with the email part, so I'll have to fix that.
Thanks for stopping by, Dean. Your help is always valuable.
Yeah, thank you. We learn from each other. Take
Oh,
care.
yeah.
So anyway, that's
That's beautiful.
that's
Yeah, really.
yeah. And so essentially what I've done is I've taken out the concern about all the setup behind the scenes.
Right.
As far as the session part that we were talking about, sessions don't really play well with WordPress. I've gotten a lot of mixed results and had problems with sessions in WordPress. And WordPress, when in my other integrations using sessions, if you do the sessions and then you go to, there's a tools site health, it will flag that it's detecting that a session has been started, and it will throw up, complaints like saying that WordPress uses sessions for the block editor. And so basically WordPress doesn't like us using our own sessions. So for the token management, what I've done is I've created a system for doing file storage. So when the token is being created, it's being stored in a little file. And every time you reach out to the database again, it's updating that token so that you maintain that same connection. And yeah, and it's an individualized token because the plugin saves a little user ID to a cookie, and then it basically, based on that user ID, it saves the token. So when that same user comes back and queries the database again, it grabs that user's token. And then there's an alternative for obviously, a lot of times you don't know if that person can accept cookies or not. So there's always an issue with whether or not you can do cookies. So what the plugin does is it does a hash of client data, like the IP address, the browser version, all of that stuff, and hashes that into, essentially uses that as the user ID. So it's not like 100%, I guess it wouldn't be 100% guaranteed to be unique, like a unique, like a UUID, but it's got to be pretty darn close, because by the time you
Yeah.
take all that information and you hash it, then, and the end result is that if you end up with two people, and as a matter of fact, one of the things I saw in one of the other classes that I was looking at was that somebody that had a file storage option, it wasn't individualized. So if you chose to use file storage instead of sessions, that meant everybody connecting to the database was using the same token and the same connection. And so I was like, nope, that's not going to work. So
Yeah.
I individualized
You
it.
learned a lot from this, didn't you, Ron?
Oh, I learned such a huge amount from this. So much about building WordPress
Yeah.
plugins, yeah, huge amount.
Did it change your mind at all about how you set up your schema for FileMaker?
I can't say that it did, but like, what do you mean? Anything
Well,
specifically?
because when I got in to do the web publishing and working with SQL and things like that, I mean, that's where I learned early on that the way people name fields is
Yeah.
just all
Yeah.
wrong. And
Yeah.
objects and, and the APIs do a pretty good job of shielding you from some of that, but
Yeah.
it just kind of made me create my databases maybe differently
Mhm.
than I would from the beginning, because I'm going like this. I don't care when, if it's 20 years from now, this is going to end up on the web and I want it built correctly. And,
Yeah.
and so I did. I started changing how I actually put my schema and relationships and everything together based on what I knew of the web and what made it really efficient at some point.
Yeah. At this point, well, I mean, the standards that I use, that I haven't had the need to change anything yet, but I mean,
Yeah.
things like naming conventions and relationships and things like that, because it might be something that I may look at one point. But
Yeah.
you know, the nice thing is that the data API, I think, accounts for all that pretty well.
Yeah, it does. Does a really good job.
Yeah.
If you sort of follow the premise that you have to have a name that's compatible on, say, 4 fronts, it's got to be a FileMaker name, which is pretty flexible. It's got to be a JSON compatible key, so
Correct.
it's not going to have a like, you know, certain things in it. It should be JavaScript compatible key, so that's no spaces. It should be SQL compatible, right? If you can cover those 4 areas, you pretty much have something that's decent.
Yeah.
And then use ID, because that's the only right one for
Yeah.
IDs, but that's me.
But even at that, I changed it working in SQL only, because when you make the queries, you have to append the name of the database so that you didn't have your conflict with ID equals ID.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
that's about it for now. I mean, like I said, I
Yeah.
would have liked to have, my hope was to have had a more polished presentation and everything, but
It's all good.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool.
thanks.
It is actually helpful sometimes to not see it polished, because
Yeah.
then you get into the guts of how it works and why it doesn't work.
Yeah,
You know, and it's like, I think you learn a lot more from that than saying, oh, look what I did.
yeah.
It's
Doesn't always
cool,
work
but
the first
I
time.
don't get it.
Uh, oh, I'm gonna stop my screen share.
Uh-oh.
And there we go.
Thanks so much. I got to hop.
All right, Joe, thanks for coming.
You bet. Appreciated the overview. Very cool.
It was.
Ryan, you had mentioned that you had encountered some caching earlier in your preso.
Yeah.
But I don't think you touched base on it later on. Did you determine where it was coming from? It's probably on the API routes, I'm guessing, but was it something, or was it on every site, or a plugin specifically that was caching?
It was definitely a plugin specifically.
Okay.
It was once I deactivated that particular plugin, it was no
What did
longer.
that plugin do? Was it some kind of an optimization thing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
gotcha. Yeah. So it's probably caching all the API routes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they wouldn't make certain ones or be able to like sort of blacklist them, that they wouldn't get cached, or whitelist them, however you want to look at it.
And I think most of them do have, you know, you can determine page by page even what's caching, what's not caching. I just, at the time, I just didn't take the time to look into it because it wasn't a big concern. So I just deactivated that plugin.
Right. How are you handling, I'm not sure if I missed it, WordPress's authentication for, like, let's say putting something behind WordPress's login?
I haven't done anything with that yet.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
some of the integrations that I've done, a couple of them actually had to do with like a customer portal, and I just bypassed the WordPress user schema altogether and just, you know, set up a system in FileMaker where the customer has their own username and password that they authenticate against, and then in that particular one, it then just sets a session cookie that says that they're logged in. And each page will check for that, and subsequent pages will check for that. And, yeah, send them back to the login page. So, yeah, so it's I have the system I put in for each customer to have their own password is they have an encrypted password, so the login is done through a script that decrypts it and checks it against the password that they've entered and stuff like that. So like when I was exploring that, one of the simple ones that I saw was like if you just gave each customer their own password, for instance, and you could do a simple login where they could just put in their email and their password, and you could do a find for that email and that password. And if the record has that email and that password, that could be your indication. But I certainly wouldn't use something like that if there was any security, concerns whatsoever. But the one that I ended up putting together, like I said, uses the encrypted password and uses a script to check their authentication. So,
Right.
yeah, that was one of the things that, I felt like would be kind of a big use case scenario for small businesses wanting to provide a customer portal. It's such an expected thing nowadays that whoever you're doing business with has a way to log into their website so you can look up your account and, look up your invoices, look up your, whatever information you need to find, be able to log right in through the website. So,
Yeah, what we found is, I mean, that's all we build, right? All our clients build is portals,
yeah,
and lots of them have WordPress sites, but usually, like, it's not a great experience to have the portal inside the WordPress site because the
yeah,
portal is very utility, right? I'm
yeah.
going to maybe check on the tracking of my order and update my printing status or something like that. So we popped them out. They usually just pop a button and pop them into a new browser,
Yeah.
new tab. Or put it in an iframe if it's something that's very widget-like. Like, let's say I want to look up the current rate of mortgages in my city or something like that. And that connects to their database. Then
Yeah.
it's kind of very fixed real estate. And, otherwise you always have a problem with sliding and things like that.
Yeah.
Like outer frame, inner frame. And that's not usually a problem because most people don't use WordPress to log in with. Like the average business doesn't.
Yeah.
I've noticed anyway. So they're not using the WordPress admin stuff unless you have some kind of learning system or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't found much use for the WordPress login system. So. Well, that's all I got today.
So have you done PHP prior to this?
Over the last few years. So I originally, like decades ago, I was a web developer first, but that was back when everything was written in Perl. Like I had written a whole suite of programs in Perl. As a matter of fact, I honestly did a lot of WordPress type stuff long before it was a thing. Like, so I wrote some Perl scripts that allowed people to set up their own gallery and upload their own pictures and stuff like that before user management, content management was a thing. But then I got away from it and I got into FileMaker. And then years later, I tried to get back to getting into doing some website stuff, and everything had changed. Like now it's all PHP and JavaScript and all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't call myself a web developer anymore because like what I used to do a couple decades ago just is gone. Like everything has changed so much that it's.
Yeah, but you know what? The truth is, I get that, right? I get that. Like my first computer was a ZX81 and I learned assembly language as my first language, and BASIC. But in reality, even from then to now, every computer language set variables in some fashion. Do some kind of math calculation on that, string manipulation, whatever it is. I'll call it math. Conditional branching and looping. And that's it. Every language is the same. And I don't think it really matters until 2 years ago, until GPT. Now we can actually ask a question with English and get a result.
Right.
Never been able to do that prior to now. So that has changed a little bit, but I didn't have to learn that one too much. So I think it's like the skills are pretty, where I was going with this is I think the skills are pretty transferable.
Right.
Like I haven't done PHP in 8 years, and I'm looking at your screen and saying, I know PHP,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not, it's not like it's not cryptic. It's just another language. Yeah, I know there's arrows and equal signs and stuff like that, which mean
Yeah.
something totally different in say JavaScript. But it's, you can kind of wrap your head around it again, I think so. I
I
think
were-
saw
great to
I
learn
saw
that.
a similarity with C because I started with that way back when to PHP and JavaScript to be very, very close in what they had, and the changes were not so different.
It was actually kind of funny going along with exactly what you're saying. Probably 12 years ago or something, as when I was working as an in-house developer doing FileMaker, they had a young kid doing the website, and he was a great kid and doing all the website. At that point, I had not done anything ever with PHP at that point, but he was running into a problem with whatever scripting he was doing, and he just asked if I could help. And I said,
Yeah.
well, look, I don't know PHP at all, but I can take a look for you. And scanning through the code, I was able to pick out like what I recognized as being like, okay, you've got an opening tag here for this, and you
Yeah,
don't have
syntactical issues. Yeah.
syntax. Yeah. And I was able to identify the problem that he couldn't find, which, I'm sure he could have if he eventually, like we all know, I could be looking at the same problem and just can't see it, go to bed, wake up
Yeah.
the next day and look at it, and it's right there. But it was, that reassurance that, when you have the head for languages, the computer languages and all of that stuff that you talked about is similar in all of them. So there's always the ability to.
And just going back to that, like the idea of pair coding is so valuable. Like I've always opened it up to virtually anybody. I say, hey, I'll pair code with anybody hour per hour, because even though I'm going to use 2 hours to get 1 hour of my personal work done, I'll be more than twice as productive just because they catch things. And it doesn't even have to be somebody who's really super, they can text like half the time it's variable names. I got a bad
Yeah.
text, or like you said, syntax where
Yeah.
I'm missing closing brace or something like that. And a real junior developer can spot that. Like they don't have to have 99.9% skill. They can have like a 70 to 80%
Yeah.
skill, and they'll
Yep.
still help you so much further, right? So really
Yeah,
valuable.
it's kind of funny because you can find the opening and closing when everything else in between is so complex. It's like you're not seeing all that, but you see, the opening tag, the closing
Yeah.
tag, the parentheses or whatever. I think, like you're saying, when I get to the point where I understand all of that complex stuff that's going in between those tags, now I'm looking for more complex errors instead of just, so I don't know. It just I get what you're saying. It's like what's recognizable is what sticks out. And when you get to the
Yeah,
point,
and name first name. What did I say last in the last script or
Yeah.
last bit of code, last function? And then they can remind you each time. Oh, you use capital N. It's not a small n or whatever.
so
So
it's probably been going on 5 years since I finally picked up and started doing the first data API integration that I worked on. And actually, no, because it was not data API. The first one I did was PHP API. But it was just before the PHP API started getting deprecated, and like they announced that it was going away. And so I had to make the transition to the data API. And so, yeah, getting back up to speed with HTML, which has changed so much because, back when I was doing HTML, there wasn't even a div tag. Like it was, and now everything is div tags. It's,
yeah.
and, and CSS has just come so far and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the samples that I built for the plugin, I mean, I can't take that much credit. I feel like I was cheating because I used Chat GPT, and it's just amazing what Chat GPT can do. And I've been blown away by how much I can get done with coding now because I can ask Chat GPT, but I also am learning at the same time. As I'm copying and pasting these code snippets from Chat GPT into my coding and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's how that's done. And that's the way that works. And all that kind of stuff kind of starts to come together. That being said, I've also run into Chat GPT can be really frustrating at times.
Yeah.
I mean,
Do
there
you-
are times where I've had some of the functions that I were working on as they grow in length and complexity. Sometimes Chat GPT starts to get lost.
Yeah.
It'll like, I'll say, okay, I need to add this to the code, and it'll return the function, but this time it's dropped off something that we
Yeah.
added, 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm asking it, why did you leave that out? And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. So you really have to kind of keep an eye on it and get used to how it works, and keep checking it, especially if you're working on like ongoing coding and
Mhm.
building coding that you're building a piece at a time, which I had great success with, like, okay, Chat GPT, give me this. Okay, now add this. And, how can we do this? And all of that kind of stuff was great. But as it grows in complexity and stuff, Chat GPT starts to get lost, I've had it go into kind of a loop where it'll give me the coding, I'll test it, and I'll get an error, and I'll tell Chat GPT I got this error. So it'll say, oh, well, to account for that, you need to do this, and it'll give me the fix. The fix will produce another error. And then when I ask it for the fix for that error, the fix goes back to the first error. And I've got caught into loops.
There's some ways around that. I'm not, if you've done much sort of research on prompting, but what you can do is, first of all, you have a context window, right?
Yeah.
GPT can only process so much. And especially when you start getting into code, you start pushing the context out the other end.
Yeah.
So some of that gets truncated. And if you think about GPT in general, or the concept of this attention, it's trying to pay attention to these different parts, and it can only handle so much. The GPT-4 has like 13 attention heads, I think they call them. And it can only pay attention to these different things. So what you can do is, instead of just keep adding on to your code and being sort of lazy with your thread, manage it, go back to the earlier ones, take your code, paste it up there, plus your extra requirements, and periodically ask it, say, give me a summation of all of my requirements that I need for this code. And it'll take that, go back up to your top one with your code. So now you only have 2 or 3 items in your entire thread, and then just keep doing that until you start to go offline, and then summarize and bring it back up to the top. That'll stop that from happening like almost instantly.
That's exactly the kind of thing that I ended up doing when it started to get off track, and it was returning code where it was losing some of the earlier parameters. I would ask it to please, summarize, tell me what our objectives have been thus far. And then it would give me the objectives back again. And so yeah, I've done exactly that kind of stuff to get it back on track, asking it to, reiterate what the objectives are, and then make sure that those objectives are being applied and stuff like that. And then just breaking it down into smaller parts of code, instead of expecting it to write, the whole function, just editing just the bits and pieces that I'm working at each.
I think a thing, and that's the small chunks, is really important. I think a thing that a lot of people, including myself, I often get lost in is I get lazy. Like, I'm a pretty good developer, but I get lazy, and I'm an incredibly lazy engineer. And so you're generating something, and it gets a longer code. Okay, this is pretty good. I want to add this feature, add this extra bit of business logic. And then I get this really complex thing, and then it suddenly has a bug. And it's like, oh crap, I gotta now look at this code that I have not really been following along and figure out what it does. Right. And I can't just ask GPT to fix it, because it's created that bug. You can sometimes mention it, but otherwise it starts to go offline, like you just mentioned. And that's kind of a pitfall there. Sometimes you have to even take it to a smarter model. Like they just released 01, which is really good at doing that. In 1 or 2 iterations, it can fix virtually any code so far that I've seen.
Wow.
So
yeah, it definitely opens a lot of doors for, just being able to do things that building this plugin took me, I've been working on it for a couple of months, but it would have taken me 6 or 8 months to do without Chat GPT. So
yeah.
So,
I can't remember. We have I'm in Canada here. We have a bookstore called Chapters. It's a big book branch. It's kind of like a Barnes and Noble, I guess it would be, or something like that. And I remember I couldn't afford much, right? So I would go into the bookstore and I would read books on FileMaker, read books on every piece of code, whatever I was working on, sit in the store, read it up, okay, and have to memorize and understand something from the book over.
oh,
So,
wow.
and that was like now it's like don't have to learn anything.
No,
Good.
it's all at your fingertips.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
kind of
we-
like goes back to the FileMaker certification that I struggled with for years and finally passed it like one of the last days it was available. But so much of it was stuff that I never memorized it because it's right there at my fingertips.
yeah, why would you? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly. Yeah.
And so it was always a struggle to try and, commit all that stuff to memory whenever it had come up for me. All I did was look it up, 2 seconds to look it up and find out what the, whatever the answer was. So yeah. So, but we have the tools at our disposal. So yeah, why would you memorize all that stuff when it's right there when you need it? So,
Hmm.
but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I've learned so much through working with this stuff and working with ChatGPT. Like I said, it's not just doing it for me, it's teaching me. I'm learning so much from it. And so a lot of
Well, I think people feel sometimes guilty because of that, but I don't feel guilty when I use a calculator to do math compared to a slide
Right.
rule or an abacus.
Right.
I'm totally fine with that. I don't
Yeah.
mind using a paint roller when I could paint anything with a brush.
Yeah.
It's a roller, right? There's nothing wrong with using a tool.
Or a paint sprayer when you're
Exactly,
wanting
right?
it done
Or I'd even
faster.
hire somebody to spray paint that thing
Yeah.
because I don't want to get
Yeah.
dirty, right? But yeah, the point being you get these higher level tools. So the thing that you're learning, like I think we still run, like the brain engine still revs up to the red line or wherever that is that you're
Mhm.
comfortable at, regardless of whether I'm going on a fast road or a slow road.
Yeah.
And like I used to, like literally, I when I was first learning Node.js, I had a bug in my code that I couldn't compile my code for like months. Like it was just brutal. Like, and there's nothing, there were no sources, no ability, for me at least to find out anything. But now it's like, okay, I'm running faster and I'm solving the same problem and I'm not spending months on it, but I'm still revving up, if you will, to the same ability. But it may not be on this little minutia thing that I could easily solve with the calculator. Now
Yeah.
it's some grander, bigger picture thing.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit I definitely have been struggling with that, feeling like, like I'm cheating because I'm, using
Nah.
ChatGPT.
Now, if we can just get the LLMs to be better at giving us FileMaker stuff.
Here's the thing. Install MBS plugin, go into a script, grab the copy as text, paste it into GPT and ask it questions about the script. Exceptionally good at comprehension of the script, even if it doesn't know perfect syntax. Looking at the instructions from there, and they're reasonably semantic, get JSON set element is pretty obvious what it is and the arguments and such. It's really, really good at that. So if you want to debug something, it's pretty decent at that. And we seen one of our users the other day pasted something where he's grabbing the CSS as XML using base elements plugin and pasting it into GPT and saying, hey, I want to make these changes, returns the XML, converts that back with the same plugin and pastes it into his code. And that's pretty cool. And it's not bad at doing that. Give it, I don't know, all the scripts as samples in your database. And I think you got a pretty much can write your code for you.
I've been really surprised that, I've used ChatGPT to write a couple of custom functions for FileMaker and been really surprised that it knows how to do that, that FileMaker is in there. Through doing this plugin, I was surprised that how much it knew about the data API. Like it's in there. Like
Yeah, there's a lot more information. When 3 came out, or 3.5 came out, so about a year and a bit ago, what you would do. It wouldn't know too much about it. Would, you know, hallucinate some names of functions. Very, very close and very convincing, but they weren't quite right.
Yeah.
And but then some of my code is kind of along the same line, so it's about the same. And but if you go find about, you know, 3 or 4 really big custom functions that you have, because they'll cover lots of stuff, and say, here's some examples of FileMaker custom functions. Like, so you got this few shot prompting,
Yeah.
giving it a few examples, and then say, now this is what I got so far in my custom function. I want to change it to do this, and then it was already really good at that point. But just by giving it the examples, you go really far.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Brian and Jonathan abandoned us.
It looks like.
Yeah. And Alan's stuck without a microphone over there across the room. So
Ron, where else do you go for PHP info? Like, have you ever looked at like, are there any forums, or where are you going for that, or just basically GPT?
right now,
Stack
just
Overflow.
GPT. Yeah. Yeah. I just, you know, when I run into questions about PHP, I just throw it in Google. What is it? W3 stuff that comes up.
Yeah, the web schools or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much, you know, a quick throw anything in Google pretty quick and it comes up with something that I can. So I'm not part of any forums. I was talking about, you know, how good our forums in the community and I was also mentioning, you know, years ago I used to script in Perl. That was how I did that too, was being real active on Perl boards and forums. And so that was a big help way back then. So
I was on a lot of XML boards when I was writing the book.
yeah.
And they got to know me really well.
Yeah, I was saying earlier, I was doing content management stuff before that was a thing.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
only I'd known how big it was going to become. I built some, you know, little websites for my family. Like I came up with a concept of building a wedding website and allowing them to go up and upload their own pictures and stuff, you know, and this is, I wouldn't even be able to guess at what year it was, but I don't think MySpace was even out yet. So pre-Facebook, pre-MySpace, pre all of that kind of stuff. But it was all stuff that I'd written in Perl.
Oh yeah, that used to be the way.
Yeah. Back end.
CGIs that were running the world.
Yeah. Back end content management where the website owner could log in with their username and password and go upload their own pictures and change their own text on their pages and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to bring back the marquee. It's still there, but
I know.
flashing and marquee.
Blink. Blink.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and the music that would start playing as soon as you open the page.
Yeah.
God awful. Oh.
It's actually a pain to try to play music now. You got to sort of fake that these are clicked on things.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Ron. Thank you, Charles, always. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. That was fun.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the invite, Alan. Sorry I couldn't make it there today, but I'll shoot for December.
Yep. December will be our next in person. So
I think you're only like an hour and a half, even if that away.
Yep.
So it's not bad.
Mm,
Cool.
yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, Beverly. Charles, I'll follow up with you on.
Yeah,
maybe-
I'll look for that information. You know, it's kind of funny. Like, you got all these frameworks, and you know, especially when it comes to JavaScript, there's like a zillion frameworks, one every week. I even, you know, Fetterforms is its own framework.
Yeah.
All these things. At the end of the day, PHP is still running like 70+% of the websites in the world.
Yeah.
it's kind of funny, you know.
Yeah,
And jQuery exactly the same amount, even though all of these frameworks are designed to replace that.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think that came up in conversation not too long ago. Somebody talking about, do you think PHP will be phased out? And I was like, I can't even see how, I can't even imagine it. You know,
no time soon. There's no reason to. I mean, it's a back-end scripting language, and you don't to have reactive front ends. It works. It plays fine with things like Vue or React if you
Yeah.
want to as well. Vue is like the official React one that's supported by Laravel, for example, PHP framework.
Yeah.
And but as a language, I mean, Steve Winter in our community is probably the biggest PHP developer. I covered for him years ago when he went on a trip for about 7 months with all his sites and stuff, and that's where I did the most amount of PHP. And it's great for that stuff. Really, really handy. I mean, Facebook runs on more or less on a version of PHP, their own kind of hacked up one, but same
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of idea. So
Yeah.
totally scalable, totally do anything. It's a language like everything else.
I remember when PHP and ASP were like head to head, neck and
Hmm.
neck, fighting for the share of the market, whatever. And I guess ASP's gone.
Yeah, I
And
just did a quick Google here. About 5% of websites. ASP.NET, 11%. It's even, I don't even think it's that high. That's what a
yeah,
quick Google did shows, but
yeah.
oh well. Doesn't matter. It's all the same.
No,
We're all
no.
gonna be replaced by the robots in next week anyway. So
Yeah, we better be prepared to bow
yeah.
down to our robot overlords.
Yeah. I have a Charles's opinion on robots.txt file on my computer. So it should be okay. Anyhow, guys, thanks again. That was fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Cheers. I should jump.
All
Talk to you
right.
later. Bye, everybody.
I wonder last year.